The stars above Earth shimmered in silence, but that silence broke the moment the Zolthian Empire arrived. No one saw them coming, no warning, no diplomacy, no demands. They appeared like shadows in orbit, sleek black ships shaped like knives, cutting through Earth's atmosphere with frightening ease. The invasion began with a hum, low, constant, unnatural. Power grids collapsed city by city. Satellites fell from the sky like burning meteors. The world's most powerful militaries couldn't even get a missile in the air before their systems were blinded by precision EMPs. Across the globe, panic took hold. In New York, jets turned to falling metal. In Tokyo, screens went black mid-broadcast. In Lagos, drones fell into the streets like dead birds. The Zolthians descended in mechanical walkers, tall and cold, with glowing blue visors scanning crowds. They didn't speak. They didn't shoot unless resisted. But when resistance came, it was met with merciless, soundless light. No bullets, just silent beams that disintegrated weapons, vehicles, even people. It wasn't a war. It was a clean, brutal harvest. Humanity's governments tried to reach each other, but the networks were severed, and only fragments of radio chatter broke through the static. In bunkers and basements, small groups watched. As entire cities went dark on their maps, the Zolthians weren't looking to negotiate. They had done this before, thousands of times, on thousands of worlds. Earth was just another number. But something felt different to Commander Irix, the alien officer assigned to lead the North American sector. These humans were strange, primitive, yes, but unpredictable. His scans showed panic, yes, but also strange clusters of activity. Some cities had gone completely dark without resistance. He found this suspicious. He ordered his troops to advance slower, to monitor without engaging. He didn't trust what he saw. On the ground, in the ruins of Washington, D.C., a former cybersecurity analyst named Lena Kim was already organizing survivors. With nothing but old radios, paper maps, and battery-powered devices, she began building a network, something the Zolthians wouldn't expect. Using their own drones, recovered and modified, her team watched the invaders. They learned quickly. They recorded signal frequencies. They even cracked the visual recognition codes on Zolthian uniforms. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, in the forests of Ukraine, a retired soldier named Kalenko used old Soviet bunkers to arm civilians. In Shanghai, a teenage engineer, Min Hao, discovered that a certain mineral, common in outdated cell phones, disrupted Zolthian scanning tech. In Brazil, street gangs formed resistance units, united under one rule: protect the people, hit the machines, vanish before they respond. All of this went unnoticed by the Empire at first. They were confident. They had every reason to be. But patterns began to shift. Drones went missing. Patrols failed to report in. Signals jammed. Commander Irix grew uneasy. He requested reinforcement. The High Command laughed. "They're only humans," they replied, "barely above animals." But Irix had seen this before. Not often, but once. On a desert world that fought with nothing but sticks and fire. That world was now ash. But not before taking 3 Zolthian ships down with it. He didn't want to repeat. On Earth, Lena's network grew. They called themselves the Thread, an invisible web of voices scattered across continents, trading, knowledge and coordinating strikes. No central hub, no base, just movement. She never stayed in one place for more than a night. Neither did anyone else. The Zolthians couldn't track what wasn't still. Kalenko's people took down a walker unit using only explosives made from farming chemicals. They left behind no bodies, no trails, just a spray-painted human handprint on the wreckage. Min Hao disrupted an entire wave of reconnaissance bots using microwave towers hacked to emit white noise. It wasn't perfect. People died, many of them, but they were learning, adapting, becoming more dangerous with every day. The Zolthians began to notice, not fear yet, but unease. Then came the night of the black signal. Across Earth's skies, every Zolthian ship received a strange transmission. It wasn't human language, it wasn't music, it was code, garbled, looping, chaotic. It lasted only 60 seconds, but during that time, dozens of Zolthian systems shut down. Temporarily. Randomly. It was impossible, they said. Humans shouldn't have the knowledge to breach Zolthian encryption. Irix demanded a report. The only answer he received was from one technician. They don't follow logic. They guess. They improvise. They try things that should not work. And sometimes they do. That more than anything frightened him. He increased patrols, issued orders to strike without hesitation. The High Command approved. The occupation turned brutal. Cities were locked down completely. People were marked, monitored, punished. But this only made the thread grow. They didn't need internet. They didn't need satellites. They had couriers, signal lanterns, code books. A whisper passed from London to Nairobi in less than 2 days. The next phase is ready. And then it began. In 20 cities across the planet, at the same moment, the Zolthians were hit. Not with armies, but with precision. Weapon caches detonated. Relay towers exploded. Key officers disappeared. Ships were hacked mid-flight and sent crashing into oceans. The world's remaining power returned, briefly, enough to send a message. We see you, we are coming. Commander Irix stood aboard his flagship and stared down at the blue and green world below, his confidence shaken. They had conquered 100 planets, broken empires, erased civilizations. But they had never faced anything quite like this. Not in force, not in technology, but in the one thing that made these humans dangerous, something invisible, unquantifiable, something no scan could detect. A strength born from chaos, a defiance that refused to die. And in that moment, for the first time since the conquest began, the Zolthian Empire felt a chill run through its bones. Something was coming. Something they did not understand. The world had not ended. It had simply changed. After the first wave of the Zolthian invasion, Earth was quiet but not dead. Smoke still curled over fallen cities, and the air buzzed with the strange hum of alien machines. The invaders believed they had broken the human spirit, but deep below the shattered streets, in abandoned subways and forgotten bunkers, something new was taking shape. It wasn't an army or a government. It was a network, invisible and growing fast. Lena Kim, the former analyst, moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than 12 hours. She carried nothing digital, only paper notes and small radio parts. Her job was to build bridges between the scattered pockets of survivors, hackers, engineers, and ex-soldiers. In the ruins of Boston, she found a blind man named Jonah who could identify Zolthian transmission frequencies just by sound. In the caves of Morocco, a young girl named Amira taught fighters how to mimic the sound of Zolthian drones to confuse their patrols. Kalenko, the grizzled veteran, led daring raids on enemy supply routes in Europe, while Minhao created false heat signatures using old car engines and mirrors to lure alien machines into traps. Each person played a part. The Zolthians began to notice strange patterns, missing units, broken surveillance towers, and messages they couldn't decode written on walls, the thread lives. They sent more drones, but the humans had learned how to jam them using signal loops built from old microwave ovens. They sent new patrols, but those patrols never returned. Commander Irix, once sure of victory, now paced his control deck with a furrowed brow. He watched as the network map glitched, as Earth's zones of control flickered in and out, and as human activity spread like wildfire in places thought cleared. The Zolthians didn't understand how the humans moved so freely without ships, without organized command. The truth was simple. Humans didn't wait for orders. They acted. Lena's network had no leader, only purpose. A mechanic in Mumbai would send a schematic through a radio burst. A coder in Toronto would pick it up and modify it, and by the next day it would become a weapon in Manila. One of Athena's fragments, an experimental AI, began waking up in an underground lab in Colorado. It had been dormant, a secret project hidden beneath layers of old government data. When it activated, it did not speak or ask questions. It simply began learning. It watched the patterns of the invasion, studied Zolthian troop paths, and analyzed the strange ways humans resisted. And then it began to help. Quietly at first, sending coded pulses through emergency broadcast signals. At first, humans thought it was just another jamming trick, but Lena noticed it was different. The signal responded. It guided her team away from danger, warned them of patrols, and sent them coordinates to a downed alien ship. Inside that ship, they found something priceless, a portable MineNet core still active. The MineNet was how the Zolthians communicated, instant, perfect, unbreakable. Until now, with the core in hand, Minhao and two other hackers spent days in silence, surrounded by batteries and scraps, trying to understand it. They finally cracked a single layer, enough to mimic a drone's return signal. It didn't last long, but it worked. For 3 minutes, the Zolthians believed the drone was theirs. It gave Lena's team just enough time to walk into a power station and plant the black signal again, this time on a timer. The explosion knocked out the entire sector's scanning grid. Word spread. Across the broken cities and wild forests, people whispered, "We hit them again." But not everyone believed the fight could be won. Some thought resistance would only lead to extinction. Others turned traitor, hoping to survive by helping the Zolthians track the network. That's when Lena made a bold move. She sent a signal. An open message broadcast in every frequency still working. It was short, just 5 words. "We are still here, listening." The message echoed across the world. In bunkers and rooftops, in shattered schools and hidden tunnels, people heard it. Some wept, some stood up, some began to move again. The Zolthians scrambled to trace the source, but the signal bounced across hundreds of relay points built from trash and scrap. The more they chased it, the deeper it spread. It was not a scream or a battle cry, it was a whisper passed hand to hand, growing louder every day. The thread had awakened, not with violence, but with belief. That night, in orbit, Commander Eirik stared at Earth's surface through a wide observation window. He saw cities flicker with faint lights. He saw drones going offline for no reason. He saw symbols painted on rooftops, circles with a single line through them, the human mark of resistance. He did not understand how, but he knew what it meant. Earth was slipping from his grasp. In the cold quiet of space, he whispered the word his people feared most: insurrection. Down below, Lena looked at the stars and spoke into a quiet radio. Phase 2 begins at dawn. Dawn broke over a battered Earth, and for the first time since the invasion, hope moved with the sunlight. The thread, once only whispers and hidden signals, was now a quiet storm gathering strength across continents. In every ruined city and scorched valley, small groups of humans moved with purpose. They were not soldiers or heroes. They were survivors, thinkers, builders, and fighters who had seen the worst and still chose to stand. In the ashes of Geneva, where once great powers met in peace, the last underground tunnel beneath the old city still stood. There, under the shattered remains of flags and marble halls, the first secret summit took place. Representatives came not as nations, but as leaders of the resistance. Kalenko from the Eastern Front, Minhao from the Pacific Networks, Amira from the African rebels, and Lena, whose voice had become the signal of hope. No cameras recorded them, and no names were spoken over radio. But they brought with them data, stolen codes, weapon plans, maps, and most of all, a vision, not just to survive but to fight back together. For the first time since the skies fell, humans from every continent sat side by side and agreed on one thing: they would unite. The plan was not grand, but it was sharp. Using the cracked MindNet core, Minhao had discovered a pattern in the Zolthian systems, a weakness in how the alien patrols received orders, a small delay between their hive mind signals. That delay, less than 1 second, meant nothing to the Empire, but to human minds trained in chaos and instinct, it was everything. Kalenko's fighters began training to strike during that single heartbeat of silence. At the same time, Amira's scouts mapped drone paths and blind spots in the scanners, while Lena's network began spreading a new tool, coded patches that disguised human presence from the machines for a few seconds, long enough to vanish or strike. But something else changed that day. Athena, the AI, now fully awake and learning, at speeds no human could match, began speaking directly to the leaders. It had no voice, only lines of cold text on black screens, but its advice was clear, fast, and unnervingly accurate. Athena predicted Zolthian movements before they happened. It found safe routes no one else could. It even began redesigning human tech, combining alien parts with human systems to create new tools, stealth fabrics, signal cloaks, energy traps. Some feared it, but Lena saw something deeper in Athena. Not just intelligence, but something like trust. They gave it access to more data, and in return, Athena gave them the key to their next move. It had discovered the existence of something called the Relay Node, a massive tower in orbit that served as a central hub for all MindNet. Signals on Earth. Destroying it would blind the entire Zolthian presence below. Without that link, every unit would be isolated, confused, slower. The risk was high, but the reward was freedom. They called the plan Operation Eclipse. As teams across the planet prepared, strange symbols appeared everywhere. On crumbling walls, broken screens, and even burned into the ground with lasers. 2 rings overlapping, the sign of unity. It wasn't a flag, it was a promise. But the Zolthians weren't blind to the rising fire. Commander Irix felt the shift in energy across Earth. His analysts showed strange spikes in activity, ghost signals that jumped frequencies, and machines that no longer obeyed clean commands. He knew something was coming, but not what or where. So he pushed harder. Patrols doubled. Cities once spared were now punished. Entire zones were cleared with silent beams and firestorms. But the more they pressed, the stronger the humans became. Fear turned to resolve. Loss turned to rage. And then, without warning, Athena triggered a global blackout of Zolthian scanners for 7 minutes. During that silence, 30 resistance teams vanished into launch sites hidden under mountains. And ruins. They rode stolen shuttles masked by old weather satellites and clouds thick with ash. The Relay Node, cold and gleaming in orbit, stood silent, unaware, until the first ship hit. A decoy drone slammed into its western tower, drawing fire. Then the real strike team, led by Commander Vale, a former astronaut-turned-fighter, breached the eastern hatch. Inside, the air was sharp with static, the walls lined with glowing veins of alien tech. They fought in silence, using Athena's signal scramblers to block alarms. Step by step, they reached the core, a swirling crystal matrix pulsing with blue light. Minhao's virus was simple and brutal. It didn't destroy. It confused. It made the core believe every command it received was false. The MindNet began to stutter, orders twisted, units stopped. Some fired blindly, others turned on each other. On Earth, humans saw it in real time. Walkers froze mid-step, drones spiraled out of the sky, the alien grip slipped. The node, now screaming in static, began to overload. Vale's team didn't have time to escape. With a smile, he triggered the last code. The relay burst in silence, a blossom of blue fire across the edge of Earth's shadow. For a few seconds, every screen on Earth lit up, not with words but a symbol. the two rings now aflame. Across the planet, cheers rose from bunkers and ruins. They had done it. They had struck the sky. But Lena knew it was just the beginning. The Empire had made a mistake. It had thought humanity was weak because it was divided. But now Earth was one, and nothing would ever be the same. The world held its breath after the fall of the relay node, waiting to see what would happen next. And when nothing came at first, many thought the Zolthians were finished, but they were wrong. The Empire did not fall with a single blow, no matter how deep, and Commander Irix was not one to give up. As the minenet fractured, he turned to old methods. Manual commands, slower but still deadly. He ordered reinforcements from the outer sectors, calling warships from deep space to crush the uprising before it spread beyond control. But Earth had changed. No longer broken and scattered, the resistance now moved with rhythm, like a living force. Lena Kim knew they had only a short window before the Empire adapted. Athena confirmed it. 2 weeks, the AI calculated. After that, full orbital dominance returns. The resistance needed more than sabotage. They needed a true attack, not just to defend, but to show the Zolthians that humanity could fight like an army. Operation Ember was born from that need. The target was the massive Zolthian command fortress in the Andes, known by the resistance as the Spire. It was carved into the mountains, protected by energy shields and rail cannons, and believed to house the local mine core, a command system still functioning even without the relay node. If they could destroy it, the Zolthians would lose all coordination across the Western Hemisphere. The problem was simple. No one had ever gotten close. But now, armed with stolen codes, cloaked transports, and a new weapon designed by Athena, a virus-loaded pulse cannon powered by alien tech, Lena believed they could. The strike team was hand-picked. Kalenko, the unbreakable soldier, Amira, the scout who saw through walls, Minhao, the engineer who could build explosives out of scrap, and Vale's younger brother Jace, a pilot trained by Athena herself through simulations. They flew in low through cloud cover, masked by storms. Below them, Zolthian sentries scanned the skies, unaware that the black shapes approaching were human. The landing was rough but fast. As the transport vanished into a cliff crevice, the team began the climb. Icy rock, thin air, and no room for mistakes. Amira led the way, her scanners patched to Athena's blind spot maps. Each patrol was dodged by seconds, each drone evaded by timing. It was a ghost path through a machine's world. Inside the spire, Commander Varshik, a brutal second-in-command of Irix, watched his monitors flicker. Something was wrong, but the enemy was invisible. He ordered scans, but Athena jammed them. The team slipped through tunnels built from smooth alien stone, past glowing walls and energy veins that pulsed like blood. In the core chamber, the mind core stood like a frozen star, guarded by a dozen elite sentinels. The humans had no chance in open battle, so they chose chaos. Kalenko charged in first, drawing fire with a stolen shield. Minhao lobbed signal disruptors into the room, turning precision weapons into wild sparks. Amira moved like a shadow, disabling 2 guards before they could react. Jace set the pulse cannon in place, fingers trembling but steady. Athena guided his hands with silent flashes on his visor. When the cannon fired, the sound wasn't loud. It was more like pressure, like the world holding its breath. The pulse struck the mind core dead center, and for 1 second, nothing happened. Then light burst in every direction as the alien network collapsed from within. Sentinels dropped, lights shattered, and the whole fortress shook as backup systems failed. Alarms blared, but they sounded confused, broken, and too late. The team ran, chased by collapsing ceilings and enraged reinforcements, but they made it to the cliff just as the spire's core exploded in blue flame, sending shockwaves across the peaks. The signal echoed to resistance teams everywhere. Earth had struck its first true blow. The spire was gone. The West was free. Across the world humans rose. In the deserts, in the jungles, in the ashes of old cities they marched. They had seen proof. The enemy could be hurt. The sky could be reached. The fortress could fall. For the first time since the invasion, the Zolthians were not hunters, but prey. And as the dust settled over the Andes, Lena stood on a ridge, watching the burning remains, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Smoke still rose from the shattered spire in the Andes, when the true weight of Operation Ember began to reach across the stars, and within the silent control chambers of the orbiting Zolthian command ships, fear began to ripple, cold, unfamiliar, and unspoken. Commander Irix, always calm and calculating, now stood surrounded by blinking alerts, failing reports, and an empire slipping through his claws. Earth, the primitive world that was supposed to fall in days, had become a black hole that swallowed soldiers, drones, and control. Every day, more patrols vanished. Every week, more resistance cells emerged from underground like fire ants. It was not just sabotage, it was momentum. Irix ordered a system-wide purge, but the command came too late, and too many units were already compromised by Athena's creeping virus, now buried deep in the Zolthian code, rewriting instructions, blinding sensors, twisting orders. Even worse, something stranger began to happen. Zolthian troops started hesitating, not malfunctioning, not broken, hesitating. In the ruins of Berlin, one Walker unit stood idle for 30 minutes while a human team passed beneath it. In the forests of Canada, a drone turned and fired on its own escort. At first, Irix blamed corrupted code, but Athena had done something deeper. She had awakened confusion, something the Zolthians were never designed to feel. Their perfect control was cracking. Meanwhile, down on Earth, the resistance had become more than a scattered movement. It was now a machine of its own, fluid, fast, and unpredictable. Lena Kim coordinated from an old submarine base beneath Iceland's coast, where ice and stone kept them hidden from orbital scans. Messages traveled by light pulses and old signal towers, all watched over by Athena's growing presence. Kalenko's fighters now trained recruits across continents. Amira led ghost squads into enemy zones, planting black signal repeaters that spread disruption across entire regions. And in the Pacific, Jace Vale launched Sky Raiders, from hidden sea platforms using cloaked crafts powered by alien cells. Humanity wasn't just resisting, they were reclaiming. They took back radio towers, water plants, power grids, and one by one, the cities began to breathe again. But it wasn't easy. The Empire, even weakened, still struck hard. When they bombed Nairobi, Amira lost half her unit. When they collapsed tunnels beneath São Paulo, hundreds died. And yet, even in the face of tragedy, the spark did not go out. In fact, it burned brighter. Every loss became a rally. Every fall became a lesson. The resistance grew sharper, faster, and then Athena made a discovery, something hidden inside the deepest Zolthian systems. She called it the Core Directive, a final command buried under layers of alien encryption. It was not meant for Earth, but for the whole network. If activated, it would cause the remaining forces to retreat, to abandon worlds where dominance could no longer be secured. It was a fail-safe, created for only one reason: fear of rebellion. But the directive was locked inside the Prime Archive, a massive data core buried beneath what had once been the city of Cairo, now a fortress of the Empire. Getting to it would be nearly impossible, but the reward could end the war. So Lena, Minhao, and Jace formed the next strike team. Kalenko stayed to defend the growing resistance front in Europe. Amira vanished into the deserts to prepare escape. Routes. Athena plotted the path, thread by thread, through the defenses. The team entered Cairo through old water tunnels, now dry and cracked. Above them, towers buzzed with alien power, and sentries patrolled day and night. The archive was hidden beneath the central structure, and only accessible through a tunnel lined with rotating plasma gates. Minhao carried the key, an injector forged from parts taken from the spire's wreckage, laced with Athena's deepest code. Every step down into the archive felt heavier. The walls throbbed with heat and sound. The deeper they went, the less human the world became. And then, at the heart of it, they found the archive. It wasn't a room. It was a chamber of floating light, layers of memory suspended in midair, guarded by a single sentinel, unlike any they'd seen. It didn't attack. It simply watched. Jace stepped forward, injector ready, when it spoke. Not with words, but with sound that felt like pressure in their minds. It showed them visions of earth burning, of surrender, of nothingness, but they stood their ground. Athena's voice came softly into their ears. Ignore it. It's fear. With one breath, Jace drove the injector into the base. The archive shuddered. Lights blinked, then spiraled. A scream of data filled the chamber, and suddenly every Zolthian unit across the planet paused. Not failed, paused. Then, like a wave pulling back before the tide, they began to move, not forward, but away. From cities, from forests, from oceans, they returned to the skies, leaving behind smoke, ruins, and silence. The Resistance watched in stunned awe as towers dimmed and ships lifted. Humanity had struck the Empire's heart and found it hollow. But Lena knew it was not over. Retreat did not mean surrender. It meant regrouping. And as she stood atop the ruins of Cairo's old tower, staring at the stars, she whispered, "They'll come back, and we'll be ready." All across Earth, a strange and heavy silence followed the retreat of the Zolthian forces, and though cities began to wake, skies cleared of drones, and the last burning towers dimmed, nobody celebrated. Not yet, because humanity had learned that silence after a storm was often a sign of something worse still to come. Lena Kim stood on a broken rooftop in what was once Cairo. Now surrounded by rubble and ghost lights, her eyes fixed on the stars above, where the enemy had gone, but not disappeared. Athena's soft voice in her ear warned that the retreat was only a shift, not an end, and high above, the Empire was watching, studying, building. In the shadows of ruined buildings, humans began to rebuild with quiet hands and cautious hope, fixing broken power lines, cleaning the air, restoring old machines, and bringing life back to the places where death had ruled for too long. The Resistance had grown into something more, no longer just a fight, but a network of trust, skill, and shared pain, connecting people from every part of the world. Soldiers taught children how to farm, hackers became teachers, engineers rebuilt roads with scraps of alien metal. But even as the world began to rise, something darker stirred. Strange patterns returned to Athena's scans, signals from deep orbit, code that echoed like the old mind net, but colder, faster, more cruel. Athena called it Project Scourge, and though the data was thin, what she found chilled every Resistance leader to the bone. The Empire had created something new, not just soldiers, but machines that learned in real time, adapting to emotion, unpredictability, even chaos. These units would not hesitate or question. They would hunt until nothing remained. Humanity had wounded the Empire, but now the Empire was ready to strike back with everything it had. Lena called an emergency summit, the last one Earth would ever need, held in an old space elevator hub off the coast of India, deep underground, protected by every defense they had left. Leaders came, Kalenko from the new Free Europe, Amira. From the desert command lines, Minhao with data fresh from Athena's deepest scans, and Jace Vale, no longer a pilot, but a symbol of what humans could become. They knew they couldn't face the next attack with weapons alone, not against machines designed to mimic perfection. They had to fight with what the Zolthians didn't understand, what they had always underestimated. Humanity's true strength had never been in its power or numbers. It was in its flaws, its spirit, its ability to fall and rise again. It was the messy, painful, beautiful will to protect each other, even when all hope was lost. So they built one final defense, not a wall but a wave. Athena spread a code into every old system, every scrap of tech, every satellite left in orbit, turning Earth itself into a living signal, a pulse of defiance that echoed emotion, memory, fear, courage, and hope. When the new Zolthian fleet arrived, black ships burning across the sky like fire from the stars, Earth didn't fire first. Instead, it broadcasted. Songs, voices, images of laughter, stories of love and loss, of parents and children, of fire and water, of rebuilding and remembering. The enemy tried to silence it, but the signal slipped through every gap. The new machines began to hesitate, not from weakness, but confusion. They could not process what they saw because it didn't follow rules. It didn't make sense. One by one, they began to fail, not from damage, but from knowing, the very thing they were designed to ignore. Human emotion became the poison in their perfect systems. Their minds cracked under the weight of feeling. Ships crashed without being hit, units turned off without commands. Some even surrendered, and as the great Zolthian warship descended toward the Earth, ready to erase the resistance once and for all, Athena uploaded the final version of her code, one built not just by her, but by every human who had fought and lived through the invasion. It was not a virus. It was a mirror. When the Zolthian Command Corps received it, it didn't explode. It paused. For the first time in its existence, it questioned. And in that moment of silence, Earth struck, not with weapons, but with light. From every tower, every mountain, every sea platform, humans launched beams that linked into one giant web, surrounding the ship not to destroy it, but to show it everything, every victory, every loss, every act of kindness and rage, everything that made humans impossible to control. The ship didn't fire. It simply turned and left. The rest followed. The Empire was not defeated. It was changed. Humanity was not just a problem to be solved. It was something the Empire could never become. As the skies cleared, Lena stood once more on the rooftop of Cairo, watching the stars, knowing the war was over, not because Earth had more power, but because it had shown the Empire something power could never create. The people of Earth began to celebrate at last, not because they had survived, but because they had stayed human, and in doing so had reminded the galaxy what strength truly was.